I was just thinking about how it's like everyone is in a shared psychedelic journey.
We've got the first nurse in Canada on the podcast today to receive the legal exemption for psilocybin therapy. She works for the organization TheraPsil, which you might have heard in our last podcast with Thomas Hartle, who was the first patient to get the legal exemption for psilocybin therapy in Canada. And Natasha talks about her experience working in palliative care before she joined the organization. And we also get into the legal trip that she did with psilocybin. So I really hope you enjoy this. This is going to be a very, very informative podcast for anybody that's looking to get into the space as a nurse or practitioner. And I really hope you guys get a lot of value out of this one. Enjoy. Natasha Fearnley.
Yes.
Here we are.
Brett. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Yeah, I'm feeling really good.
Good.
I feel as though my life is full of a lot of really amazing things, and I feel very grateful.
Amazing. Are you getting lots of requests to be interviewed by people?
Not really.
Really?
I think that I have a lot of email requests to connect with people individually.
Okay.
A lot of nurses reaching out, wanting to like learn about opportunities and things like that. But this is my first offer to be on a podcast, so thank you.
Wow, amazing!
Yeah.
I saw your little. What was it that you did? That little short interview that you did.
Yeah.
That was like a TheraPsil Instagram thing.
It was like like a webinar just
Right.
about nursing perspective.
Yeah.
And it was. I think it was an hour long, but an hour goes by fast.
It sure does. With a good conversation, it's amazing how quick it can feel. That's very cool. Okay. And I thought you did amazing on that little 30-minute.
Thank you.
And that's why I was like, oh, I want to get Natasha. Like you're very succinct. It sounds like you have a strong passion and conviction for what you're doing. And I want to hear the story of Natasha. Let's just get into kind of like maybe through your, not necessarily going back to like childhood or anything crazy, but let's go through kind of like your path to becoming a nurse. And now you are the clinical intake director at TheraPsil.
Correct.
Right on. So tell me about maybe the years as a nurse before your work with TheraPsil.
Can I go back to childhood?
You sure can.
I feel as though for the story to make sense, it makes more sense to talk about like the lineage of events that brought me to be who I am today.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's go all the way back as far as you want to go.
Okay. So I grew up in northeastern Ontario in a very small little town.
Which town?
Called Kirkland Lake, or just on the outskirts of Kirkland Lake.
Okay.
And it was very cold in the winters and very snowy and a lot of mosquitoes in the very short summers. I had very supportive parents who were, my dad is a biker covered in tattoos, and my parents are both very liberal and very inclusive. And I was always encouraged to be abnormal and just do whatever I wanted and make my own decisions and be very independent. So I always had that like loving and acceptance for other people taught to me throughout my entire life. But growing up in a small town, I was surrounded by only a small number of individuals to be friends with because it was so small. And those people at times weren't the kindest to me.
Okay. A little bit of bullying going on.
Some bullying, some, I always, even as a young child, was very reflective on why the people were that way. And obviously as a kid, you take it to heart and you're hurt, but I also knew that, their own upbringing and their own situation was like causing them to have this projection onto me. You
knew that from a young age?
From a young age.
Did anybody teach you to think that way?
I'm not necessarily sure.
Maybe that's an interesting thing to have wired in from a young age.
Maybe my parents in a way, but I just think it came naturally to me that I was very observant of human interaction. And I really enjoy finding connections between behaviors and causes. And that's always been something I've always been doing my whole life. So as a young child, I had some trauma related to my relationships with my friends. I also had some experiences of some like sexual abuse when it comes to some distant relatives in my family.
Whoa, heavy.
Yeah. And so when I was a young teenager, I was angry and hurt and rebellious.
Right.
And I didn't know, I kind of shoved down all of those feelings and all of those memories, and they were in my subconscious and I wasn't even aware of them.
Right.
I forgot that those things happened to me.
Just total blackout.
Just blacked it out. And then just acted unkind to my parents and started to do a lot of illicit substances and partying and not coming home and just disconnecting and trying to cope with my reality.
Yeah.
And when I was probably about 14, I was prescribed an SSRI, and I was put on an anti-anxiety medication. And it was the first time when the medication kicked in that I was like, whoa, this is what it's like to be calm and not feel like there's adrenaline and cortisol running through my system. And I was like, this is great. But I had a disdain for pharmaceuticals.
Right.
And I was like, I do not want to be taking a pill for my entire life. I don't want to be dependent on this. I don't want to like change my neurology in a way that I can't get it back.
Right. Even though it was like working for you.
Even though it was working. Yeah. And so what happened is I was on it for about a month. And then I stopped taking it because I was like, I feel better. I don't need this. And then from that point on, I was like, I need to find a way to feel that way without pharmaceuticals. And, you know, I started to learn about sleep hypnosis and doing that. And I started to do like that led to breath work, which then led to yoga, which then kind of throughout nursing school, I started to do projects where I was learning about like alternative therapies. And it just kind of was on this path of trying to heal my own trauma.
Right.
Right. And yeah. And I ended up in nursing school. Actually, I never really wanted to be a nurse.
No.
I wanted to go to school for fine art.
Okay.
And I wanted to be a graphic designer.
Wow.
Yeah. And
but you wanted to work with people though, I'm getting.
Well, so I think that when I was considering going to school for art, I had a lot of people around me concerned that I wouldn't be able to financially support myself in that career path. Yep. Which is like...
Well, the whole world is telling you
yeah,
that you can go be an artist, but you're going to be a broke loser.
Yeah, which is such BS. Totally. But that was what I was told. And when you're like 16, you don't know like that you shouldn't listen to all these adults that are telling you this and that.
Right.
So...
They gave up on their dreams a long time ago.
Exactly. And so it's funny that I ended up in nursing school because... there was this one instance one day in which I had taken a year off after high school. I worked for a year. I was like, okay, I need to make a decision now about post-secondary. And one of my brother's best friends was in nursing school, and he just happened to come over to the house when my brother wasn't home. And so we happened to spend an hour chatting. And he was like, why don't you go to school for 2 years to college? You could become a nurse, and then you'll be able to always have work. And you'll always have money, and then you can still do like art on the side.
Yeah. So you get your safety net.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can go do the high risk stuff.
Exactly.
Being a broke artist.
Yeah, exactly. And so I went to the college like the next day and like found out what prerequisites I needed to get into the nursing program. And I did all that, and I got into the 2-year nursing program. And I did 1 semester, and then I was like, oh, like, I'm good at this. And like, why don't I do the university program? Because that opportunity was there. When you said to yourself, I'm good at this, were you also really enjoying it? I don't know if I was necessarily enjoying it, but I think that as a young child, being a creative individual, I didn't excel in like the Western public school system. Right. And so I had this perception that I like wasn't intelligent enough. Right. But I am very intelligent. I just wasn't in the right environment. And so when I ended up I resonate with that so much. Yeah. When I ended up in nursing school, I was like, whoa, I'm smart. And I could, like, I was getting great grades, and I was like, I could do this. I didn't even know that I could do this. And like, this is hard. Just in a bad container before, right? Yeah. And so then I ended up in the university program, and it was hard because nursing wasn't like my dream. And I ended up in this program, and there was this huge challenge of like, I always wanted to go to school for art and I gave that up. And now I have this career that I'm having to go down. And there was a lot of anxiety about like having to have a license and having to be registered and having to keep that up. Like I didn't even really know that when I got into nursing. Like
it's very structured.
Yeah. I was like, oh, there's all these rules. I was like, I hate rules. I don't want to be part of this.
Yeah. Totally.
And like the whole way through university, I was like, I don't even know if this is really what I want. And I ended up
existential crisis.
It was difficult.
There's so many options. What do I do?
Yeah.
Is this it?
And I definitely am so grateful I did that because of the whole understanding my abilities as a human and like proving to myself that I am very capable.
Right.
I needed that.
Yeah. Because you didn't get that from the schooling system that you were in.
And just my upbringing, my parents are so lovely, but they like love me no matter what. So I never had to prove myself. I never was pushed.
Yeah.
They were just like whatever.
I know I'm awesome, guys, but you're pretty biased.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I ended up becoming a nurse. And
this was in Ontario that you did your nursing?
This was in Ontario. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And I really just was in nursing school, like angry about pharmaceuticals and angry about the Western medical model. And I feel bad. I have one teacher that I was really like not the greatest to because I was frustrated and I may have took it out on her. Sorry. Sorry, Elizabeth.
Don't take it personal.
Yeah.
She was just going through a tough time.
Yeah. Thanks for everything you taught me. So yeah. And then I ended up, I was in a committed relationship then, and my partner at the time went to Royal Roads University. And so I ended up, while I was in nursing school, every summer traveling to Vancouver Island, spending 4 months here, living here, and then going back to university in Ontario. And I did that every year for 3.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Me and my dog.
Two lives.
I have a German Shepherd, and we would drive across Canada together and drive back, just me and her.
It's a good drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's like a quarter of it's a good drive.
Yeah. You just cruise through the prairies.
Yeah.
And then...
yeah, that part can be tough to keep your eyes open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I enjoy driving. Like, it makes me happy. I loved it. Yeah. I did.
Just that feeling of pure freedom.
I think I did all the way from Ontario to Vancouver Island in like 3.5 or 4 days.
Wow.
It was like, I did like 16 hours and then slept for 6 and then like 15 hours.
Did you just sleep in the car?
Yeah.
Pull over and...
Yeah, I had a hatchback and I had my dog's bed in the back, and she's a big dog, and we just both like laid on the bed, and I was safe because I have a German Shepherd.
Yeah. You got your security guard there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I started to connect with Vancouver Island and the West Coast and just the lifestyle out here, and just feeling as though like this is where I belong. And just meeting amazing people.
And then when did you make the decision to be a full-time Vancouver Islander?
The moment I graduated.
Okay, I was like, are you? I'm like, you're still going back to Ontario?
No, no. My final practicum was in 2016.
Okay.
The year I graduated. And I did that online, and I did it here in BC. So I did like a nursing practicum in BC while I was still in school. And then I've lived here full time since then. So January 2016.
2016. Okay. So at the same time I got here. I got here in November 2015.
Where'd you come from?
Ontario.
Oh, where?
A small town outside of Hamilton. Which, for anybody listening that doesn't know Ontario, it's a small town outside of Toronto. Most people know Toronto, right?
Yeah. Everyone thinks I'm from Toronto when I say I'm from Ontario. I'm like, nah.
Yeah, that's just the peg, right? Most people, especially people who aren't from Canada, they're like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. Outside of that, there isn't a ton of highlights. In Victoria, I didn't know much about Victoria. Really, coming from Ontario, I kind of knew it a little bit, maybe Tofino, and that was like the first place I went to go surfing. And I was actually living in Vancouver at the time because I thought that was the place for me. Yeah. And then I saw some stuff on the island, and I was like, ooh, I'm going to have to get over here. I
went to Vancouver once when I was a teenager to like visit a friend I met at like a bike rally with my dad. And that was the first time I came to BC, and they were all talking about the island. And in my mind, in my mind, I was like, oh, there must be like a little island, that there's like one park on. Like, that's what I had
and there
no
are
idea.
Those, but then there's the big one.
But they were talking about this island. And I just remember like reflecting like, oh my God, I had no idea at the time that like that was going to be my home, and I was going to be in love with the island that they were referring to.
Did you feel it at a certain point when you were this like deeply connected? You kind of mentioned it, you were connecting to the community and the people here.
I had a switch that went off with me. It was probably about 6 weeks after I got here. I think I was only going to be here for about 2 months was the plan.
Mm-hmm.
I showed up in a motorhome. It broke
Mm-hmm.
down. And then I just didn't really want to try and fix it. I was like, I think I'm good. Let's just stay here. And I've barely left in the last 6 years, however long I've been here, because it's kind of got everything.
I think that we shouldn't maybe
Yeah,
talk
it's terrible,
about too
terrible
much.
place.
Yeah.
You really, no one should come here.
No, it kind of sucks. It
got
rains a
nothing
lot.
for
It
you,
gets
yeah.
really gray in the winter.
Oh yeah, no light.
Just a bunch of weird hippies, just stay
Mhm.
away.
Yeah, dangerous
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, no, my moment was probably the first day I was here. My partner and we had just done an epic road trip across Canada. We weren't together. We were friends and we knew each other since high school. And he was just we hung out once and he was like, drive across Canada with me. And I was like, oh, I have to work. And he was like, come on, drive across Canada with me. And I was like, okay. And I quit my job.
Yeah.
And we spent a month in his car.
Wow.
And we ended the trip here. And when we got here, we stayed at Ocean Island Backpackers Hostel, downtown Victoria.
I know it.
And I remember just the vibes of a hostel and just walking around downtown Victoria and looking at all the beautiful old buildings.
Yeah.
And then we made our way to Tofino. And those moments were just this is it.
Yeah, you see those beaches out there and you're
Yeah.
like, what? This is Canada?
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Mhm.
Again, terrible place. Don't get me. Yeah, that's very cool. I that's such a similar story to what I experienced coming out here as well. And then the community out here.
Mhm.
There's a different vibe. There's a different connection to nature. I noticed as well, especially coming from Southern Ontario. I know you're northeastern,
Mhm.
but a whole different side of environmentalism out here that is very prominent, and everybody's very politically active on that side. And so, how did that integrate? Coming in and kind of joining with this community, and then moving into an alternative form of nursing, what you do now?
Yeah, I think that just touching on people being connected to the environment here, I think that from what I've learned through my journey doing this work, the connection with the environment helps people to understand that we're all connected and everything is interconnected and we are part of the earth. And the more you spend in nature and the more you spend with the trees and the water, the more you realize that we're all one. And so of course it's easier to be in a close-knit community when that's the environment you're around and that's the culture.
Yeah.
And that really makes sense. And what are we touching on? The journey from nursing to getting into this work.
Yeah, so you were doing traditional nursing, Western medicine system, which was giving you a lot of anger, angst, what do you ever want to call it? A lot of resistance to that.
There was beautiful parts about it as well.
Yeah. What were the beautiful parts?
So my background is in geriatrics and palliative care and a lot of dementia work.
Wow. Yeah.
And I really enjoy connecting with humans and connecting with people. And I found so much value in just caring for others. And I actually, through working with people with dementia and people in altered states due to their diagnosis, really learned that I am talented at holding space for others.
Right. Meeting them where they're at.
Yeah. And just when someone is in a delirium or they have dementia and they think that they're a 7-year-old little girl at the train station, it's you don't tell them they're not a 7-year-old girl at a train station. You meet them there.
Right. Because that's their reality.
Because that's their reality. And also regulating my own central nervous system to be calm and grounded for the sake of them being able to mirror my central nervous system is really something that I just do naturally.
Right.
And I just love, I'm a very smiley person and I kind of have a lot of emotions on my face. So it's really easy for me to communicate with people who are in an altered state to kind of make them feel safe because they perceive that I'm okay. So then they think things are okay.
Right. Because whatever they're experiencing, it could be potentially pretty scary.
Definitely. Very scary.
And if you're in that altered state and there's fear that kicks in, that could be a very dangerous situation, especially if you have someone telling you, oh, no, this isn't happening. This is all in your head, but it's so real for them. And we can't really be inside anyone's head. So who are we to say what they're experiencing? Right?
Yeah, it's real to them. So it's their reality. And then just the Western medical model and how we care for the elderly people is just so not great.
No.
Right? Like being in a long-term care facility where you're already so vulnerable and you're already so scared, and then the staff only have 10 minutes to get you up because there's just such a staffing shortage, and the staff they're caring people, but they're burnt out because their jobs are so hard, and it's just like
feels very mechanical.
It's difficult, but I felt like I brought a lot of light and positivity to that work. And I ended up transitioning from doing I worked as a care aide while I was in nursing school, and I also worked in the activities department kind of a little bit. So doing fun things with the staff members or with the residents. And then I ended up working as an RN on the floor doing nursing when I graduated. And then I ended up being really close with the managers at my facility and collaborating with them. And then I ended up in a managerial position at a facility. So I ended up I was the assistant director of care for a facility during peak pandemic.
Whoa.
Yeah. Wow. And so that was a whole experience.
That's all out here, right?
That was here.
So what facility was that at?
It was called Selkirk Seniors Village.
Okay.
The facility in general was kind of in despair. It was a sister facility to the one that I had worked at for a really long time.
Right.
And so the manager that I was really close with, let me know that this job opening was happening. And I knew that they were really short-staffed. They were struggling to function in their organization, in their facility. But I was like, okay, I want to go there and try to help improve things. So I did that before there was a pandemic. And then I was in this role where, it was already kind of things were in shambles, and I was doing my best to try to bring some sort of organization and improve things. And then the pandemic was announced and everything just went
chaos.
It was chaos.
Was there any outbreaks at the facility?
There wasn't, not at my facility. Yeah. There were at facilities that were owned by the same company on the mainland. Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, in the lower mainland there.
Yeah, I have a really interesting story about that. Actually, I had actually had a psychedelic experience. I went to a retreat. I did a training. This training called Chiron.
Okay.
And I don't know so I had an experience, and in this experience, I connected with my body and found that there was this energy inside of me that was anxious and scared. And through this experience that I had, I somehow communicated with this energy and told it you're safe and you're a part of me and I trust you. And instead of being this black energy moving around me, it became this very white light in the middle of my chest. And it became powerful.
Wow.
And I had this experience probably a week before the pandemic was announced on the Friday of what was March 13th.
Yeah, it was kind of coming. You were hearing some news about it, and then all of a sudden it was there.
So I got back from having this experience in which I found my power and found that this anxiety within me was actually a power. And then on the Friday where the pandemic was announced, I was at work at the facility. And our main doctor came in and said, this is going to be really bad. A lot of people are going to die. We need to put this facility on lockdown so that people aren't being exposed. And this is really important. And the bosses that I worked with that were above me, they went home at 2:00 and they didn't put the facility on lockdown.
Whoa.
And they just left. And I was third in charge. So that was my two bosses, and I was the third in charge of the facility.
The show now.
Yeah. So, I didn't know what to do. I went home and I was laying in bed and I was just reading about the stats of the timing of how long it is where you put the building on lockdown versus the amount of cases that are likely to happen versus and it was literally every 24 hours makes a difference.
Right.
And I felt this energy inside of me, this black energy that was scared and moving around. Yeah. And I was I realized in that moment, this is my body telling me that I'm powerful and I need to do something.
And I can handle this.
Yeah. And I woke up the next morning, set my alarm for 6:30 on a Saturday. I had no responsibility to be there. And I went into the facility and I put the place on lockdown.
What?
Yeah. And I locked all the doors and I put signs up and I told people you need to get the names of everyone who comes in here. And
Holy crap.
yeah, and it was just like a very momentous moment in my life.
Yeah. Were there any supervisors there that day? Like, it's a Saturday. Like, there's probably people.
Well, like, I'm the supervisor.
Right. Yeah.
There was like an RN who's like the head nurse.
Yeah. She just kind of came in and you're like,
I'm like, this is happening.
I'm doing some reading.
Yeah.
We're locking this down.
We're putting this on lockdown.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did the like residents react to that?
Well, I don't know if they were really aware.
Right.
It's a really large facility, and lockdown includes the lobby and the main doors. So they weren't aware. And it was only a couple days. So if any family members came, they were allowed in. They just had to sign in. They had to follow all these protocols.
You started your tracking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that was my last bit of my Western medical model nursing career.
Right.
And I did that, and I worked throughout the pandemic, like different regulations every day. We needed to do changes to our COVID protocols every day. It was like so like 10 out of 10 stress.
Oh, no kidding.
On the daily.
Yeah.
And then I got so burnt out. I was like, I can't do this. And I quit. I gave my resignation.
So what month was this? 'Cause the pandemic hit in March of 2020.
So it was in August.
Right. And that's like right when TheraPsil,
Yeah.
like, all the exemptions came through.
Yeah.
Right.
So in August, I knew that I would likely end up working at TheraPsil because I had worked there part-time already. Through the pandemic, I was doing that managerial job, and I was also working at night for TheraPsil,
Okay.
helping to build their intake process, the very first iteration of it. And so in August, I was like, I need a break. I quit my job, and I told myself, like, I'm not going to take any other job unless it's like my dream job. Like, I'm just taking a break.
Yeah. Sounds like you earned it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't work from August until November.
Didn't work, but you were working with TheraPsil.
I wasn't at that point.
Oh, okay.
I
just took a break from it all.
took a break from it all, went to Ontario, spent some time with family, did a lot of reading, a lot of meditating, a lot of connecting with people I care about. I kind of gave myself a mission at that point to go on distance outside walks with anyone I could.
Right.
Because I was like, I have this space. Everyone's dealing with this pandemic. People need somebody.
Yep.
And like, that was my work that I did.
Oh, amazing.
I just scheduled walks with people and was just like, how's it going? I've been
feeling
meditating
okay?
and sleeping and eating well. Like, can I be like an ear?
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you still, sounds like you're still working.
I was holding space.
Yeah.
But just in like, it doesn't feel like work because it fills me up.
No. And that's the amazing thing is that is a lot of work, that emotional work of holding space for someone and being there and listening. And if that's something that doesn't feel like work, then you're doing exactly what you need to be doing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, so we've mentioned TheraPsil a bunch.
Yes.
And just for our listeners, could you describe TheraPsil, the organization, and kind of what they're doing? And then we can jump into, I guess November, you would have started working with them again and working with them full time.
Yeah. So TheraPsil is a non-for-profit. And we're an advocacy organization, and we advocate for Canadians. Specifically, we started advocating for those who are dying of cancer to get legal access to psilocybin therapy. And how we do that is that there is an application process where you can apply to Health Canada as an individual to get an exemption from like the drug regulation to be able to legally have permission to be in possession of psilocybin.
Right.
And so what we do is we help people to go through the process to apply, and we assess whether they're a good fit.
Right on.
Yeah. And then do a lot of advocacy, just like campaigning to, communicate to specifically at the beginning, Patty Haidu, who is our Minister of Health, about the need for people to have access to this therapy.
Yeah, I've been loving watching all the nurses and practitioners just all over her, tagging her, like, listen to us.
But like she's amazing because she said yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
She believes in this.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. And she's got her own bureaucratic red tape that she's fighting through as well to get these exemptions and this crazy long wait list that you were talking about earlier pushed through, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, she didn't have to say yes the first time. And like, that was a momentous moment when she was like, yes, these people can have access to this, right? It's like setting a precedent. Like,
right. And so that was the first 19.
No. So that's healthcare practitioners.
Right.
I think from my understanding, I don't remember specifically, but I think there were 2 patients at the very beginning who got exemptions granted in 2019, 2020. 2020.
Yeah, because
2020. Thomas was one of them. Exactly. 2020. Yeah.
August 4th, 2020.
Yes. So those were the first.
Yeah.
And then healthcare practitioners came after.
Okay.
But there were subsequent patients after Thomas and the other patient that had followed. So they continued to give patients exemptions. And then TheraPsil's argument was like, you're giving patients these exemptions. You need to have practitioners that can train them so that they can do this safely, or that can treat them. Sorry.
Yeah. Because I mean, as powerful as a psychedelic experience can be, it can be so much more powerful when it's mixed with proper psychotherapy with someone who understands the medicine and has a background in like clinical psychology or just counseling, some sort of mental health work.
Yeah, we usually call it that they've worked with the human psyche.
There you go. Yeah, because there's so many different disciplines and letters beside people's name for what they've done, right?
Yeah, and when someone is facing the end of their life and they're facing like existential distress, you don't really want to do mushrooms alone. Like that could be harmful.
Yeah. Okay.
You need a container, and you need to prepare extensively, and you need someone who's going to be there to make sure you're safe, because it's hard. Like having a psilocybin experience isn't easy.
Even just having someone to hold your hand. It's amazing how much that makes a difference.
A huge difference. Or just someone in the room so you know you're not alone.
Exactly. Because psilocybin's very much a substance that, like you said, makes you feel connected to everything. And if you you feel connected to everything, but there's no one there, it's almost like you don't have something to ground yourself to.
Yeah.
Like I've had someone just hold my hand, and that's all I needed.
Yeah.
And it was just a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
And then I've done it alone, and like feel a little bit kind of like I wish someone was here, and like I want to message someone, but I can't use my phone in that state.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. And I think having that person there.
And then the prep that goes into it, there is a lot of counseling beforehand in which the patient is building trust with the person who's going to hold space, and they're reflecting on the patient's like whole life and what they've experienced and who they are and their own traumas, because everyone has their own traumas and what they've been suppressing in their body and where they are at, and teaching the patient ways to be grounded and like breath work and like preparing them to be able to be in a better place to do the medicine session. Like ideally people build up to the medicine session through self-care practices. So it's not like you just are living your life and then you take mushrooms and it's going to be transformative in a way that it can be.
Right.
It's like you should probably start journaling and start maybe doing some meditation. There's no specific things that need to be done. It's very personalized.
Right.
So like, what are the things you want to do to prepare yourself?
Right.
And then building that like personal care plan and then using those to build up to the medicine session. And it's pretty amazing what I've been seeing from these patients who have either gotten their exemption or are waiting on their exemption, how it's like the journey starts the moment that they reach out to us.
Amazing.
The moment that they talk to us, the moment that there's the idea of doing this, I see that there's like this little tiny bit of motivation to do a little bit more for themselves, because there's this like hope that there's something that could help them.
Right. Because like Thomas was speaking to, he reached a point where the traditional medical system just kind of said, that's all we can do. Kind of like go home, be with your family, but we've ran out of ideas. So it's almost like a, not even a good luck, just like, wish you all the best. And then you're kind of like sending someone off to their like doom without any real I have so many thoughts that I've been reflecting on lately about words and how powerful words are, and how like words are like spells. And when the medical model tells someone like, you're palliative, you're dying, then of course they're going to decline. Because you're telling them that. Yeah. It's like our minds are connected to our bodies. And so it's been really hard with my process, because I have to help people to write letters to Health Canada explaining how important it is that they get access to psilocybin. And so we're explaining the severity of their situation. But through doing that, it's like forcing Canadians who are dying to like deeply reflect on how horrible the situation they're in is. And that's harmful. And like Health Canada has been coming back
specifically after their doctors have written letters saying, we support this. They've gone through TheraPsil's processes. They've explained their situation, being like, we need to know your exact prognosis, which is like, how long do you have to live? And
Are
then,
you close enough to the end?
Do you
That's
have a
wild.
month? Do you have 3 months? And it's like, nobody really knows how long someone has to live. And how harmful is it to have this person who's like in extreme anxiety have to go back to their doctors that are super busy, barely have time to be like, hey, I need you to put in writing that I only have a specific number of days left for Health Canada.
And I'm sure that puts the doctor in an extremely
they don't
uncomfortable
want to
position as well. I don't want to say that you have 6 weeks.
No.
Like that's not something a doctor wants to write down on a piece of paper.
No.
But I mean, if that's what it takes right now, then I'm of mind to just like, let's just whatever we need to do to get people in.
Of course.
And just like navigating the system.
We're doing it, but it's just like the system needs to change.
Absolutely. And it's going to. Like enough doctors kind of forging those letters and saying, this is what that will raise enough flags. Hopefully. I think it's kind of an unstoppable movement at this point.
Yeah. And the people at Health Canada, like, I don't know how they can justify like arguing with the physicians.
Yeah.
Because the people at Health Canada aren't the experts on this. The physicians are.
Right.
So it's just.
Yeah, we should listen to our scientists and our doctors.
Exactly.
And the people who we've put in these positions that are studying it day in, day out for decades.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. That's I mean, I can go on that rabbit hole forever about how maybe the government needs to just, we need to listen to, the experts a little bit more.
Yeah. The science.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really feel so honored to like get to be so informed on these patients' stories.
Yeah.
And like I bring them through my intake process and learn so much about them and then see their journey and see them healing. And I'm like in this very unique position to be learning like on the ground about this therapy.
Absolutely.
And just seeing it in real action.
Yeah. You're like, this is like the clinical study that's happening within the four walls that you work in. That's so cool.
And TheraPsil is actually partnering with Imperial College London and McGill University to conduct research.
Amazing.
And we have a research director, Julia, who's rocking it, like building up the system to do research. And I'm really excited
and
for
will
that.
you be running clinical trials?
No. So the goal is to do research on people that go through our process. So it wouldn't be specifically a clinical trial. It would be like observational research on the people that are doing this in our process.
Amazing. Yeah.
Which is like more real data than like a controlled study.
Yeah. Because they're in it. Like these are people that are dealing with that terminal diagnosis. Do they start working with them before, like in the intake process? And then you put them into...
Yeah. So the research partnership plans aren't completely established yet. So they're in the works. So ideally what would happen is, from my understanding, is that someone who's external from TheraPsil, who like is unbiased, would then contact the patient, and there'd be specific surveys for them to complete, like at pre and then like during and post at different time points to compare. Like stuff about anxiety and depression and like scoring those on scales.
And if they can get people before they talk to you, because it's I think that would be very powerful, right? Because like you said, people hit that end of the road, right? They with the current medical system, and they've lost all hope. They're in a bit of a place of desperation and fear because they don't know what else to do. Talking to them at that point, that's like the baseline. Right?
Yeah, because once they connect with us, like I said, they've already on the journey. I don't know if there's a way to connect with them before. I don't think that
shift is what's so fascinating to me, right? Because I would feel the exact same way. My mother went through this when I was 25, so 9 years ago. She was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and about 3 months later, they were like, okay, that's it. We can't do anything else for you. And there was no other options at that time, or none that we could find. I'm sure there were some people doing underground therapy. But I think about that often as I've been going through and hearing these stories from people of like, we needed some hope. We needed something. And there's just nothing. And that's unfortunate. And so that's why I'm passionate and why I'm so excited with the work that you guys are doing, because I want to make sure that, as few people as possible go through that same situation.
And with end of life and people facing the end of their life, hope is so important.
Yeah.
But hope is important for everyone.
Yes.
It's not just like, it's like we can justify that someone at the end of their life has no other options.
Mm-hmm.
How is this going to do harm to them? Of course they should get access, but like everyone should have access to this in a therapeutic, safe manner.
Yes. And do you think this is just a good, tangible place to start? Because it's really, that's why, there's a big push for this right now, because how do you say no to someone that might only have a few weeks to live, right? It's easy to say no to someone and vet them and put them through the ringer and be like, oh, okay, you're actually fine. Like, you don't need this therapy. It's still not right to do that. But I think it's easier to say someone who's like clearly healthy, like physically, that's, maybe middle-aged or whatever, right? But to say it to someone that's like right at the end, that's pretty cold and heartless. So.
Yeah, but it's heartless to say to anyone.
True.
And like, there are like healthy, normal, young people who obviously everyone struggles with some mental health stuff. Everyone can benefit. Yep. But there are a lot of people out there suffering from like severe PTSD and like severe like substance use disorder and all of these other diagnoses that could really benefit from this.
Yeah.
And at this point, I've started to submit Section 56 applications for people with other diagnoses. For the sake of communicating to Health Canada that we support this for all in medical need. Yes. And it's unfortunate because, we're a very small organization and I'm the only one at this point, like managing clinical intake and managing like assessing whether patients qualify for this. And so it would be amazing if I could just open up the doors and say, yeah, you have anxiety, you have depression, you have PTSD, you have substance use disorder, you're suffering, like let's bring you through the process and submit your exemption. But we just don't have the capacity to do that.
Right.
So we're strategically submitting a couple exemptions for each diagnosis as a way to continue to advocate for access to those diagnoses. And
have anybody, like, has anyone outside of the scope of like terminal end of life diagnosis, has anyone gotten the exemption on the patient side, like for PTSD or?
So no, but we have, at the beginning of when these exemptions were granted, we did have exemptions accepted and granted for people who were in remission. So that means that they've had a life-threatening diagnosis, but they don't have one currently, or people that have like an active diagnosis, but they're not considered palliative. So we saw that they opened up to those 3 different categories.
Right.
But for some reason in the past, like 4 to 6 months, Health Canada has stopped approving exemptions for people in remission or active diagnosis and are cutting it back to only people who are like, we can prove that they're actively dying, which is frustrating.
What do you think the slowdown is? Is it because there's an election coming?
I don't know. I could hypothesize about what's going on with Health Canada and their strategy and their perspective, but like I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I think that maybe part of it might be their capacity and that there's so many exemptions coming through that they're like, we can't process all of these. So let's just only process the ones that are actively palliative so that we can stay up with all these applications.
Right.
I think that's probably part of it.
I have a theory too that kind of the whole world is operating in a bit of a state of burnout right now. It's been a very intense year and a half for everyone. Personally, pretty much everybody I know is going through some sort of, personal existential crisis, whatever it is, overworked, overstressed. Cortisol levels have been way too high for too many months in a row. I have a lot of empathy for everybody working within this space and all the pressure that's being put on it.
I was just thinking about how it's like everyone is in a shared psychedelic journey.
Right.
And how like we are
consciousness is suffering.
Yeah. And how when you've done work with psychedelics, you start to realize that there's like this balance in existence of good and bad. And like when you're in a psilocybin journey, for example, it's like when there's something that comes up that's uncomfortable, that causes anxiety, you're supposed to go in it and accept it and trust and let go. And you always come out on the other side to something beautiful and light. And there's lessons in the hard stuff that is like the most important lessons that cause the change and the ability to adapt after the session when you integrate.
Yes.
And so like there is a collective experience right now of being in the hard stuff and being in the trauma and in the scary. And there's always kind of a reason and something at the end of it, some transformation, and there's always light at the end of the tunnel. But if you haven't been doing this work and you don't know that, it's so much harder and so much scarier. Right. And people don't have this understanding if they just don't have it. Like, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. This feeling of like, this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's sit with it. Let's not make it good or bad, whatever we're feeling right now. And let's just observe and sit and come out the other side stronger.
Yeah. It's really hard for a lot of people right now.
I know, it's crazy. It's strange times, and there will be something really powerful and amazing on the other side of all of this.
Yeah, there already is things that are strong and amazing and powerful that are coming out of it. I see it. I see all of the change and growth, and like part of this work and what we're doing is like able to happen because of what's going on in the world and the times that we're in. So
what do you feel from your perspective in this pandemic and from the work that you've been doing? What are some of these beautiful things that you're starting to see emerge?
I think there's more awareness of what's needed to be happy and healthy. I think that through the pandemic, we're seeing that like we need to be connected to one another, and we need to be connected to nature, and we need to think about mental health, and we need to help the people who are worse off in society, and we need equality, and everyone needs to be given the same opportunities and be treated the same. And I see this influx of people wanting to move away from the cities and move to like more rural situations and grow their own food and buy local and spend local and just be more connected. And I think that people are motivated to take action regarding those things. And I think that people need to get off their phones. People need to not believe everything they read about all of the bad things that are happening, or believe it, but know that that's not all there is. It's like there's this reality on our phones that we're all looking at about, like, we're addicted to this like negative news about all of these horrible things, but like you go for a walk and you look around and like life's beautiful. And like we need to connect with that more and connect with each other more, and not just sink into the phones and to the stories and
into all the negative media headlines that are coming out. I agree. I've always, not always, but I've really attached the philosophy of focusing on what you can control,
what you can do,
almost like the arm's length approach. And don't get me wrong, you can reach a lot of people through media. That's what we're doing in this podcast, right? And that's an important thing as well. But also, when we're done this, to shut it down and go spend time in your local community and at like arm's length from people, treating people well in your circle around you, and letting it like ripple out from there. I love that so much, and it just makes you feel amazing. It makes everybody else feel amazing, and you understand that like you have a ton of power.
You do. Everyone has huge power.
Yeah.
Like you walk down the street, and instead of looking down, you look at the person you walk by and you smile. That changes the entire world.
Yeah.
It does. And like we're all interconnected and everyone has the power. And like you don't have to be on all the time and be perfect all the time. And like you're allowed to be sad and you're allowed to be anxious and you're allowed to have hard times. But like if you can do something positive, it makes such an impact more than people really realize it does.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because then that one person who got a smile from a stranger, they feel a little better. They smile at another stranger. They open the door for someone. Someone like drops something, they pick it up for them. And it just like goes and goes and goes.
Do you remember like
quick.
Peak pandemic, you would like go down the street and people were like scared to look at other people? I was literally walking down the street going, hi, hello. And I was like yelling at people, hi, hello.
How are you doing? Okay. Is there anything I can do for you? Would you like me to hold space for you? Let's go for a walk.
But we're all...
Fear can really grip people.
It can.
And I think it's good for us to understand that while there are some things out there that can be quite scary right now, we have to face it and not like turn our head away from what's going on.
Or reach out for assistance. Like we don't have to face this alone.
Yes.
Like we feel very alone when you're at home and you're in your room and you're looking at Instagram and you're comparing yourself to what everyone else is doing. You feel very alone, but we're not alone.
Yeah.
And I think that what I've been reflecting on through this work is that like a lot of the psychedelic psychotherapy process is a container for people to feel not alone. Right. And like people are sick and they're scared and they're feeling alone in their fear.
Right.
Or people have substance use disorder. They're struggling with mental health. They're on the street. They're homeless. They have these like negative thoughts, these negative stories in their mind, and they feel alone. And humans just need to know they're not alone because we're not alone.
Yeah.
And there's so much power in just being witnessed and being connected. And it doesn't take much to just like, if you're feeling alone right now, like call somebody. They want to hear from you.
Right.
You might think they don't, but they do.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Because they're also feeling alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like we're all kind of, and I think that's where I've gotten to as well, is that the feeling of alone, it's not about not being around people. It's like it's a state of mind. Like nobody understands my suffering. I have this problem in my life and nobody will get it. And if you go and do any sort of group therapy or a session where everyone's kind of like working on stuff, I think the biggest piece of gold that I've gotten out of that is that we're all suffering in some way. Like we all have some sort of struggle or challenge that's going on in our lives that makes us feel alone. And when you see that, like maybe a room of 100 people together and you're like, whoa, everyone is in some sort of pain, that feeling makes you feel connected to people.
Yeah, you're connected in your pain.
Exactly.
And in your struggle.
And it's like a relief. You're like, oh, it's not just me.
I know. One thing that I've really learned to love about myself is that I have this ability to be really vulnerable. And I think that stems from like my support system, and I'm very supported and very loved. So I know that I can just tell anyone anything. And I feel comfortable and confident doing that. But I've seen this like beautiful thing that happens when I'm vulnerable with somebody and they put their walls down and they're like, oh, you're human and you're messed up. And and I'm like saying it as if it's like not a big deal. And they're just able to then do that back to me.
Exactly. Yeah. You like open the door for them. It's to like vulnerability breeds vulnerability. Showing someone that like, I'm fucked up too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like come in this room and join me.
Yeah, exactly. Let's
hang out together.
Yeah. Let's do it together.
Right. And then it's like, it's not scary anymore. No. And you realize your problems aren't as significant. We love to hold on to our problems like they're really big and scary and unique and no one gets it. Right. And then someone else comes in and tells you about their shit and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I should let this go. Maybe this doesn't have to be something that's just like my little doll that I like safety blanket that I hold on to.
But then also it's important to remember that holding on and that like having this like hiding it, that's often a strategy for survival. And like people sometimes are in situations where they have to do that. And that is like, that's you protecting yourself and that's okay. Right. And like acknowledging that that's you like loving yourself and caring for yourself is that like not being so open about it or not expressing it, like, right? So it's not that is a negative. It's just that there's a way to transition to be open, but you need the container of people around you to be safe to do it.
Right.
And so finding that container is what's important. And psychedelic psychotherapy is just the perfect container to do that. It's like, honestly, you don't need the psilocybin to have a safe container.
Right.
This culture of psilocybin and psychedelic psychotherapy, because people learn so much about connection and they learn how to hold space, they can provide that container within it. But there's so much to be gained just from the process. Then the psilocybin is just this giant catalyst that gets you to this other place, right? So it's not just the mushroom. And as we're talking about this, I really wanted to touch on something that's been like really near and dear to my heart and that I've been like thinking about a lot, is just like wanting to reduce harm and wanting people to understand that like just because there are all these news articles coming out saying like mushrooms will heal your depression, it's not the best idea to just it's not a magic pill. You shouldn't just like go on your own and take mushrooms and think that that's going to get you where you need to be. And I'm really worried that there's not enough education happening to align with all this talk about the effectiveness of psychedelics, because the studies that are proving that these are really effective are like very controlled clinical trials in which people are supported.
Right.
It's not out, you know, and like I'm a supporter of, you know, exploring psychedelics in a less structured way. If you're educated and you're safe and you have people around you that you trust, and
you know, that container.
If you have the container. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, if you're wanting to do psilocybin and you don't have like a therapist support and you don't have somebody to sit for you, like at least find a friend and have a pact and say, like, we can tell each other anything, and like ensure that you trust one another. Start talking about your trauma, talk about like safe touch, and that like you can hold hands, but like, and you just build a relationship with them before one of you does it while one of you's sober.
Right.
And like build yourself the container.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to do it. I couldn't agree with you more. And I really want to hear now about your session that you did. So we spoke a little bit before that you have used psychedelics in your past before working with TheraPsil, but then you got to the opportunity to actually sit in a like clinical therapy setting and do that. So let's walk us through that experience.
It was probably the most life-changing experience of my entire existence.
And just before you get into that, the reason why you did that is because you need to have that experience as someone who's going to be giving, like, providing this treatment for people.
Yeah.
And
so
without sitting through it yourself.
Imagine like if I were going to teach you how to fly a plane and I was going to bring you to the airport and get in a plane and say, well, I've never done this before, but this is...
Let's cross our fingers. Yeah, for the best.
Exactly. Like, that would be ridiculous.
I wouldn't get in that plane with you.
No. But imagine if I brought you to the airport and I have had hours of flying time and I've experienced every like uncomfortable situation and learned to adjust to it. Right. And I'm like confident in how much faster and easier and comfortable you're going to learn to fly a plane.
Yeah,
right.
And I ask you questions about your experience and you can answer everything.
Yeah, okay, exactly. Good. And then you feel confident and you trust me because you know that I've been there and that this isn't like foreign to me. So I've had experiences before the one that I did as training purposes. And my experiences before, some of them were supported, some of them were structured, some of them were not. And I've definitely had a lot of learning and have had a lot of growth through those personal experiences outside of that container. Yeah. But through getting my own Section 56 exemption and being in psychedelic psychotherapy training, so I was in a training cohort and I was learning so many amazing things about the research and the process and how to hold space and how to do this work. I then began to prepare with two people who were also trained to do this, who were counselors and social workers and professionals, and just them holding space for me and helping me prepare for this journey as if I was a patient, so that I can prepare and have the most transformative experience I can in the safest container I can. And I decided to we always help patients to build intentions so that you can have something to focus on for your journey. What is your intention for this? And my intention was really focused on reflecting on understanding what it would be like to be one of the patients that I help. And so I focused my thoughts and my reflections on like, what would it mean if I was told I had a limited life expectancy? And like, what would happen? And
you'd already been speaking with so many people that were in that situation that you could kind of slip into those shoes.
But also, I worked as a nurse and I've provided palliative care. I've literally like held someone's hand as they've taken their last breath. Like I've been there. And I never really have reflected on my own immortality. Like I don't know if I was just young or if it was just easier to dissociate from those thoughts, but I have so much respect for the beauty of the end of someone's life, but I never thought about my own. I was like, I'm invincible. And then I like forced myself to start reflecting on it. And I
was that a conscious thought that you were invincible? Or did you kind of realize that like that was just
it was just like, yeah, it was just underneath. I was just like, I'm not going to think about like
it's your, like you talked about before, it's your own like survival mechanism.
It's to cope.
Yeah.
Right? To cope.
Yeah.
And
because all you're seeing is mortality constantly. People leaving.
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to be me.
Yeah. No. And so I started to think about like, if I had a limited life expectancy, I think that what I would want in that situation would be to take advantage of the little limited time I have left. And to like, there was like a list of things, like a bucket list that I started reflecting on, like, these are the things I'd want to do. But then I also reflected, like, I know that I would probably be terrified and anxious and depressed and feel alone. And I would probably curl up in a ball and be in bed and cry. And like, I don't think I would cope with that situation, even though my hope is that I would. And so I went into this legal prepared for psilocybin session with those thoughts. And I was with my sitters, Adrienne Oberg and Anne-Marie Armour, and I ingested 5 grams of mushrooms, made into a tea. We had a beautiful room all set up that was all Zen. I had an altar with like items on it that were special to me. And I had eye shades and music. And I went into my experience. And as I was going into it, Adrian prompted me and he said, like, why are you here? And I was like, yeah, I was like, I started crying immediately. Like the mushrooms were just kicking in. I just started to feel like altered and getting visuals. And I was like, I just want to be able to like understand the people I help. And I was like, started bawling. And then I went in and it's like,
that's a powerful thing to say in that moment.
Yeah.
Because it sounds, you kind of said like going into that, you were feeling like you weren't really ready for it.
No.
And then for him to ask that question, for you to say that.
Yeah.
It's power of mushrooms.
Yeah.
In that state, right?
Something really neat also is
you knew exactly what you're doing when you got there.
And the day before, it was really weird. You start to, like, when you start to see that everything's interconnected, you also start to see like synchronicities and that like it feels as though things happen for a reason. And the day before my psilocybin session, I woke up and my goal was to be as grounded as possible to prepare. And I asked my roommate, who's like one of my best friends, I was like, what do you do to get grounded? And he was like, oh, I walk around in the dirt with no shoes on.
So simple.
So we woke up and we went to the beach and then we ended up like impromptu at a garden and we walked around with no shoes on. We smelled every single flower and we picked like all these herbs and we just like looked at the trees. We got ice cream. And then it's like, we just did all of these things and I didn't realize it, but I was living a day that I would live as if I had limited time left.
Wow.
Like I had this beautiful day that was like, if I knew
this was my last day.
Yeah, it would be the day. And I did that on the Friday.
Unintentionally.
And then on the like subconsciously.
Right.
Yeah. And then, okay, so then moving forward to the session day, I take the psilocybin. Adrian asks me why I'm here. I say like, I just want to understand the people I care for. And then I go in and I have this inward experience. There's like a lot of visuals, a lot of connecting with my body, a lot of insights. And I had told my sitters that I wanted to have permission to speak throughout the session we were recording the audio. So if I had thoughts, I could just like say them out loud so that I remembered. And I had some major insights about stories and how we are all told stories in our lives. And we all have this voice in our head that's like a narrator of our own story. And how growing up, I was exposed through my sister to like some stories that are really important to me. Like, for example, Star Wars or like The Matrix.
Right.
And I started to realize that like those stories have kind of like really become part of my identity and who I am.
How you see the world.
That's how I see the world. That's how I act. That's like, but But I was thinking about how often people's stories that they're told growing up are stories of being alone and stories that are sad and stories that aren't okay. And like, I have those stories too. But if we're stuck in those stories and those narrators in our mind, we're just stuck in them, and how we need to be able to know that we're not alone so we can adjust the stories in our mind. Yeah. So there was that insight. And then there was also an insight about time, and about how, like, it's not about how much time we have, but about the like quality of the time that we have. And
because we actually don't know how much time we have.
No, nobody knows.
It can only be about quality
Yeah.
if you look at it from that direction.
Exactly. And so I kind of came out of the session feeling like I wanted to continue to like live out my story in the best way I can, and make the most out of my time, and like love myself and be grounded and live as if I have limited time left, for the reason of being able to then bring that to other people. It's like, the more I love myself and the more I make the most of my time and the more I keep my story in this positive sense, the more I can teach that to others and be able to be there for others and have the capacity to hold space.
Yeah, you can just show people that it's possible.
Yeah.
When you talk about vulnerability, right? When someone sees another person that's living really well, is very present, is very happy, and maybe they haven't been around people that are like that, and then they see that person, they're like, oh, it is possible. And it's like that first little, light bulb that can go off of being like, okay, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? That whole thing. It's very important to show up for people in that way, if you can, to show them that, like, hey, I'm here and we're doing it.
Yeah. I have this thing that I've been learning about myself, that I am really good at holding space for others, but that is kind of my way of coping with reality, is that if I'm responsible for ensuring someone else is okay, I then am motivated to make myself okay. But if I'm alone and I have nobody to be responsible for, that's when I'm not okay. Because it's like, I have, I guess throughout my life, like, regulated my central nervous system for the sake of other people, because I like love people and I want to make sure they're okay and I want to care for them. But like, I don't give that. Yeah. But I don't give that love to myself when I'm alone. And that's my struggle. And so I'm not always okay.
Yeah. If you were, that you probably wouldn't be human.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody's got their darkness that we're all constantly, we're our own projects, right? That we get to work on for as much time as we're here. Is that something that you became aware of during your psilocybin session, or are you kind of known that?
No, I think that I've actually only become aware of it in the last like 3 weeks.
What?
It's like a new insight. Like, I always knew that I was really good at holding space for others, and I maybe in the last 6 months I realized, like, oh, when I was a nurse and I was working with direct patient care, it was a lot easier because I was constantly holding space for people. Where now at my job, I'm doing a lot of projects and work. And so I'm not holding space for other people as much. And so it's easier for me to like fall into a depression. But I've just realized in the last couple weeks, like, this severity of how extreme it is for me. Like, that's my thing, is I need to learn how to be alone. And I actually just ended an 8-year relationship.
Whoa.
So I have this transition of like, now I can be alone, and now I'm learning like to love myself and to make myself healthy food, even if there's nobody else around to feed, and to like go for a walk in the forest, even though there's like no one else to bring to go for a walk in the forest, and
just sit with yourself too.
Just be alone.
Yeah. Do you find the need to, when you're alone, to like reach for distractions?
Oh yeah, totally. And usually the distraction is like reaching out to other people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, hey.
Exactly. That's your thing.
Yeah, that's my thing.
That's your crutch.
That's my thing.
It's humans.
It's other people. Yeah. Loving everybody. Yeah.
It's not a bad crutch to have.
No.
It's also very important to just be able to sit and be happy. And it's something that, I mean, it is important, but there's also that fundamental level of human being, is that we need community. It's so important for us. So it's good to be able, from my perspective, to feel okay being alone, but also understand that I don't want to spend that much time alone.
No, it's okay to want to connect with other people. Totally.
retreat and get your alone time and feel good in your alone time. But then like, it's not the goal to just like be by yourself. Maybe just for some people, to each their own.
Totally.
I know I need people. I need community. It's like, it's kind of it's like one of the only things I know that for sure of trusting myself, that like other human beings that I can share time with and experiences with is what it's like my oxygen, you know?
Totally.
So it's there at the core of everything. Yeah.
I do believe though that like our presence and our thoughts influence our reality in ways that aren't obvious. And so like when I'm alone and I'm like having negative thoughts, I'm like still feel as though that's like sending out some negative energy to the universe. You know, like there is a part of me that's like, I need to like hold space for existence even when I'm alone. Like, like there is power in our thoughts and our energies and our body, and that like even if I'm having negative thoughts when I'm alone, it's still like influencing things around me in ways. It's not like I'm not completely disconnected. None of us are completely disconnected.
Yeah, collective consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do.
I've
definitely.
Experienced it.
I have definitely experienced it.
But they're also, you know, like that's it's a good thing to be aware of, and to also understand that there's always going to be those negative thoughts, and they're part of the collective consciousness. Like they need to be there to balance everything out, right? Like it's it can't all just be positivity all the time, right? We all have our darkness that we're going through. So what about some of the patients that you've worked with?
There's a lot
you don't
of
have to talk about any specific people, individual, or names or anything, because I know there's confidentiality there. But what have you seen people kind of come in as and then transition into and then go out as? I've
seen people really reflecting their perspective on reality in different manners. And I think that I've seen one patient specifically is coming to mind who was told that they had only a year to live like 7 years ago. And they told me that they at no point ever considered themselves palliative. And they went and got a passport, and they were like, do you need a 5-year passport or a 10-year passport? And they were like, I'm getting a 10-year passport.
I love it.
And this individual is still alive.
Power of the mind.
Yeah. I've seen that. And like we talked about, like the hope of having something to look forward to is shifting people's perspective, which is allowing them to like embrace the power of their mind in a way that they weren't before.
And was this patient feeling that way before? Like you said they never thought they were palliative, even when they kind of hit the end of the road with their traditional like medical care?
This patient is pretty inspirational because he is been doing that before psilocybin was something that was in his perspective. No, I'm not talking about Thomas. I'm not talking
this
about
sounds
Thomas.
Familiar.
No,
that guy has a beautiful perspective on life.
And I just think this person, they are being vocal about their story, and I think that they have so much power to share with people who are in these situations about their perspective and how that's influenced their lack of progression of their disease.
Unbelievable.
So unbelievable. Yeah. Just the power of the mind really is my main learning point from everything that I'm doing. It is huge.
Yeah. And how like psilocybin is not like it's an access. It's not something that, like we talked about the magic pill. It doesn't come in and actually like, it doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything. No.
It like just allows you to open up a different pathway.
Yeah.
To have a different awareness or a different understanding.
Exactly.
Or perspective, and then off you go.
Yeah. It's like the perspective of people doing this work is that we all have our own inner healers. And like as humans, you cut your arm and then your immune system, without you being conscious of it, goes and heals that wound on your arm. Well, we have that ability when it comes to trauma and mental health. We all have our own inner healers. There's like this part inside of you that knows what you need and knows how to heal you. So like your sitters who are helping to guide you, they're not healing you. They're not magic healers. They don't have any answers. They just know that you have the answers within yourself, and they help you to find it.
Right.
And so, yeah, psilocybin doesn't change anything within us. It just turns on all of your neurons in a way in which you can really get a inside peek into what's going on within your own mind, so that you can adjust if needed, and you can create new pathways, and you can change.
Yeah. Blow out old programming and completely shake it up and turn it on its head and create something new.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
It is so cool.
Is there much talk therapy involved when you're, because a big thing with traditional psychotherapy, a lot of talking. You're sitting with a counselor, you're kind of just talking it out, and the counselor is really sitting there to get you to a place where you just figure it out yourself with enough questions or enough rambling, right? So in the actual session itself, you mentioned that you had a recorder so you could say things, but your counselor sitting with you, they're just sitting there?
Yeah. So there's a lot of talking when it comes to prep and integration, but on the medicine day, not so much talking, not a lot of counseling.
It's very experiential.
It's very like, you're encouraged to go inward and have that inner experience. Obviously, though, there's no rules and it's very personalized. So if someone feels like they need to talk, the counselors or the people sitting will oblige, but they'll also like gently encourage them to go back in. And it's usually like as the session gradually comes to an end, that's kind of when some talking may come about. Some integration may start, although sometimes people decide to be quiet and there isn't talking. But definitely more having that inward experience and being with yourself and connecting with yourself is the goal.
Right. And then the integration part, how does that work?
Yeah. So the integration is at least 3, sometimes more counseling sessions that occur after the psilocybin session. And usually those sessions, the first one is the day after or a couple days after, and then like a couple months or a couple weeks after, and then a while after. But I like to tell people about how, yes, you have these counseling sessions that are considered your integration, but integration is an active process that just continues forever. And there's so many ways to integrate. Like you could finish your session and you could be like walking down the street and you're telling your friend about something and you have an insight. Oh, you're integrating. Or you could notice that you're doing something differently after the session. That's integration. Like it could be 5 years later and you could be like, oh, there's that thing you're still integrating. Right. And it's like an ongoing process. And like once you get into this work, you realize that like life is just a lot of integrating, right? It never ends. It never ends. It never ends.
Yeah. I love that as a, I mean, with traditional, we talked a little bit about, being on SSRIs. Were you on SSRIs?
Yeah, for a very short period as a teenager.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Anti-anxieties, antidepressant medication. It's very much just like this external thing you put in, right? There's not a lot of like conscious thought to it. Don't get me wrong, people, when they're doing it, they're doing their psychotherapy as well, and maybe it's helping them get to that place. But it lacks that kind of here, like you're always going to be working on this to a goal where you actually don't need this medication anymore. It's more just like, no, you need this medication. You're going to keep taking this medication in perpetuity. Where with psilocybin and other psychedelic therapies, like you just said, 1 session, 3 counseling sessions, integration. But the drug or the substance isn't there anymore, which is a very amazing thing.
And it can have
it's very empowering,
very long lasting effects, right?
Yeah.
And like SSRIs and SNRIs and antidepressants, anti-anxiety, like those are important. They're needed. Like some people aren't okay.
Right.
And they need to have those medications to be okay.
Absolutely.
And they have a place. But they often like numb your feelings. And so it's hard to connect with like what's happening and to go through processing it and then transform it into something else.
Right.
So that's where psilocybin comes in. And often people are not okay. They go on SSRIs. And then what we do is we gradually taper them off them to then do the psilocybin session. And sometimes they don't need to go back on them because they've done something to help themselves cope with whatever was eating them away inside that made them need those medications.
What about people being on medication and doing psilocybin therapy?
Yeah, so I actually just organized for an amazing pharmacist, Jag Dole, to consult about all of my processes and our clinical stuff, and she provided amazing advice about pharmaceuticals and psilocybin. And what I learned is that SSRIs don't necessarily need to be stopped altogether, except because they're using the serotonin pathway, they can damper the effects of psilocybin. So someone would have to take a lot of a higher dose, especially if they've been on those SSRIs for a long time. But going off an SSRI really fast can be really dangerous. So I would never advise anyone to just stop taking their SSRI. They need guidance and they need to be tapered slowly. But there are concerns with other substances such as MDMA that increases your serotonin, that you can have serotonin syndrome, which can be really dangerous. Whoa. So with SSRIs, they increase your serotonin, or you continue to have more serotonin built up in your brain. And then MDMA as well. So if you combine them, it can be really dangerous.
Like an overdose on
serotonin. And you can have you can get muscle rigidity, you can have seizures, you can have fever, and you can die.
Wow.
So you have to be careful with those. But the research is showing that psilocybin itself doesn't increase serotonin in the ways that MDMA does. So we're not worried about serotonin syndrome. We're just concerned about the dampening of the effects of psilocybin. So that's why we taper people off of the SSRIs.
So then does psilocybin increase the amount of serotonin? When you take psilocybin, is it serotonin? Is it dopamine? What chemical?
Oh, you're testing me here. You're testing me here.
Oh,
let me read and get back to you. Yeah. It doesn't increase serotonin the way MDMA does. But yeah, I think it's dopamine and serotonin and they're all part of it. And it acts on the same receptors. Right? It's it kind of is a key and lock mechanism. So the psilocin, the drug psilocin is this kind of the same shape as serotonin. And then it goes into the same part in your brain that serotonin would. But yeah, I'm not a neurologist.
That's okay. Yeah. We'll have one on soon.
Yeah, and, you should. Our research director, Julia, has a master's in neurology. So she would be great.
Love to have her on.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a nerd in that sense of just wanting to understand something to the nth degree.
Yes.
As much as my brain can handle it.
Yes.
There's a point where I'm okay, I lost you.
Yeah.
Sitting and talking with someone with a PhD about something, there's always that end of the road where you're this is over my head.
Yeah, you're just smiling.
Yeah, this is a different language.
Yeah.
But that's amazing.
Yeah. So I haven't spoke of this yet, but since we're talking about medications and counterindications, so part of my position at TheraPsil is to build out our clinical intake process. And so we have an entire extensive process that we bring every patient through to assess them, to ensure that there's no counterindications, that it's not risky for them to do psilocybin, that they're a good candidate for psilocybin.
Have you had to turn anyone away?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, often. Okay. Yeah. There are people who it's just not right for them, or they have a physical reason in which it wouldn't be safe for them. And so they go through a really rigorous process that includes I do an intake assessment with everyone where I have a very detailed questionnaire and I find out all about their medical history and their medications and their physical being. And then we have a medical form that a physician must complete that also has all of those criteria in very detailed lists. And then once that's all completed, we evaluate again as a team whether they still meet our criteria and it's safe for them to do it. As well as once they're connected to a therapist, that therapist then has the opportunity to assess whether it's safe for them to do it. So there's so many steps that the patient goes through to ensure that it's a good fit for them.
Wow. And is that, so I guess the better question is how many people do get through?
Yeah. Well, right now, we've had, I think we're at 37 exemptions granted successfully.
Right. Because you also have to build the case and then pitch it to the government.
Yeah.
Right,
So through that whole entire intake process, as I'm learning about someone, I then help them to use that information to write a letter to Health Canada.
And they write the letter.
I assist them and I make a template, and
Yeah.
then we go over it together and we build it together.
Wow.
Because there's certain points that I know that we need to touch on for Health Canada.
Yeah.
So I help them to ensure that we touch on those points.
And you're like a grant writer.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I know how to like pitch this in the right way
Yeah.
to make sure that, that it's being communicated properly and there's no snags. Right on.
Yeah. And that letter is accompanied also by a letter from their physician stating the physician supports them. And then Health Canada knows that they've gone through like TheraPsil's rigorous intake process as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. So what's the future of TheraPsil? What are you guys working on right now?
Right now, our main focus is pushing for psilocybin regulation for all in medical need, like therapeutic psilocybin regulation.
Is it, so I remember talking this, with Thomas a little bit, that one of the big goals is to have it so that the individuals don't need to pitch directly, that like if they have a therapist already and they have a relationship with their therapist, they don't have to go and talk to Health Canada. It's just like their therapist can decide, yes, this is right for you, and we're just going to do it. So
our outlook and our hope is not that the therapist decides, it would be a physician. Okay. So we call this kind of like a physician or a practitioner who can prescribe. So it could be an NP, it could be any other practitioner. And we call it, we've been saying like doctor as gatekeeper model. Right. Which means that like the physician, just like marijuana, right? Like physicians can prescribe marijuana and they're the ones that are deciding, not Health Canada. Right. So we think regulation should be created that gives doctors the ability to prescribe this. Because that's not within a therapist's scope necessarily to like do the assessments and like the medical background and to prescribe something. So the end goal would be that the physician could prescribe it and then refer them to someone who can refer them to people who are trained, like therapists, nurses, social workers, to provide the therapy. Got it. So I imagine that my position may transition from specifically helping people to apply for these exemptions to instead then being like a referral service for people that have been prescribed. And I imagine that like, just like marijuana, not all doctors are going to want to take on the responsibility of prescribing this. And I think a lot of it will go through physicians who have like completed TheraPsil's training or other trainings who are competent in psilocybin therapy and understand the processes would be the ones prescribing. Yeah. And so there'll be like a network of people who can provide those prescriptions and referrals.
Network. That seems like a way more efficient system than all of these individuals having to like go down and you help them with their own individual letter. Yeah. That's just...
No, Health Canada needs to not be part of it, and it just needs to be part of the system.
Yeah. And how do you feel about that transition? Or how do you feel about the prospect of that becoming a reality?
I think that's inevitable. Yeah. I think that like we can't go back now. People need this and people know about it and more people are learning and more people are advocating and this is just the way of the world. But there is an election coming up and there's a lot of questions about what's going to happen and who's going to be elected and who our new health minister is going to be. And TheraPsil is currently working on a project to send out surveys to NPs to find out the political standpoints of a lot of the political parties and find out like who's supporting us and who isn't supporting us and communicate to MPs and to politicians like that this is something that they should be supporting and that like the Canadian public feels that they should support it. Wow. So there's a lot of
political activist
a lot of political activist campaign. And my role within that is a lot to do with like patients and organizing patients to be part of committees and to we are starting a compassionate access committee, we're calling it. And pretty much it's just a group of people, patients, practitioners, professionals to advise on regulations. So we've taken the marijuana regulations and with the help of our lawyer and Julia, our research director, we've taken them and changed them to fit psilocybin. But now that's just a really large document that's a draft. And now there needs to be more discussions about like what needs to be altered. What do we need to add? What would be ideal with regulations? And we want to create like a very clear draft regulation and be like, here, Health Canada, it's ready. Right. Just do it. Right. We've done all the work for you.
We've used the template of another substance
we've
that was in the same class only
Exactly.
3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When did weed become legal? 2018?
Yeah.
So recent.
Recently.
And Thomas and I were also talking about the Maid system
Mm-hmm.
for assisted suicide, which I think in 2016. That sounds like another great template. Are you guys working with that at all?
So we definitely use it as a way of communicating. Like if people have access to Maid, they should have access to psilocybin.
Yeah. And what does Maid stand for again?
Medical assistance in dying. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. But the regulations are completely different. And so we're more going off the marijuana regulations. And there is a big difference. Like you can't just go to a dispensary and get mushrooms and go and eat them like you do with marijuana.
Can in Vancouver right now.
Well, you can, but that's not what we think is the best approach for people to be safe. No. And so we need to think about the regulations and how they will be different from marijuana to ensure it's like medical therapeutic use.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
This has been such an amazing conversation.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about? Anything else? How can more people get involved? How can we help TheraPsil and what you guys are up to amplify this message? I know we're all just citizens here, and a lot of people listening are very passionate about this. What can they do to?
Yeah, so everything that TheraPsil has done in the past, all of our advocacy and all of the changes that have happened because of our work is because of all the people that support us. And everyone has the power to make a difference in everything that we do. And so if you want to get involved, go to our website, TheraPsil.ca, which is THERPSIL, therapeutic psilocybin. And you can read a lot about all of our processes and our team, but there is a take action page where you can see how to take action. And you can follow us on social media and you can share posts. And the big thing that we're doing is having people reach out to their MPs. And so we are in the works of creating a survey that people can then, through like very simple steps on the take action page, send these surveys about MP's perspective on psilocybin regulation. So that's coming out soon.
Amazing.
So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah.
But just, share, talk to people about this.
Yeah.
Like be honest about if you're feeling safe about your experiences, like spread the word, let people know that this is something that you're interested in. It's just like marijuana, how we were like, oh my God, I smoke weed. I don't want anyone to know. And then as soon as it was legalized, you're like, oh, my uncle that I thought was the square has been smoking weed his whole life and I didn't even know.
The whole city just reeks of weed all of a sudden.
Exactly. It's the same with this. As soon as you start talking about it and make it a safe conversation and that it's something that's normalized, that's how we change it.
Yeah, that's when the real power comes in.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
for
sharing
having
this
me.
time with us. That was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I can't wait to just continue the conversation, amplify your message. We'll link to everything that TheraPsil is doing in our newsletter coming up and on our socials as well. And just keep going.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Natasha.
Light and love, everybody.